It's a pleasure to welcome you to this event. We have a number of topics to cover this evening, the most important, of course, being the assistance that we can render to Mumia to deal with his medical condition and ultimately to free an innocent man. We want to encourage people to come up with great ideas, but not only great ideas, but to carry them out. I'd like to introduce a longtime activist and a stalwart active member in the coalition known as Suzanne Ross.
I'm not only known as Suzanne Ross, but I happen to be Suzanne Ross, too. Come on up, Mario. This is Mario Hardy, our friend and host of this event.
On the move. Thank everybody for being here this evening at All Souls Church. We're very pleased to have everyone with us. When I think of 9/11 and when other people think of 9/11, they think of a lot of different things. For me, what 9/11 immediately says to me is Mumia 911. It was 1997, 98. Pam would remember better than I would, but I was part of an organizing group that put together a concert out in San Francisco in Dolores Park, and the concert was called Mumia 911. Some of the people who conceptualized it were Boots Riley from The Coup, there was Chuck D from Public Enemy, Michael Franti from Spearhead, Zach De La Rocha from Rage Against the Machine, and a lot of other folks. I was lucky enough to be among the folks who attended and worked on the first Mumia 911 concert that drew about 7,500 people. From that point,
Repeat that number.
7,500, 7,500 people. We went on to produce that concert for another 13 years, and it grew every year. It topped out in 2001 and 2002 with over 125,000 people at Speedway Meadow and Golden Gate Park in San Francisco, and went on to become the largest single-day festival in the state of California. And it was organized and developed under the banner of Mumia 911. And Michael Franti from Spearhead was the person who really took up the mantle and footed the bill for the concert for 13 years and always made sure that Mumia was front and center and represented with his own words and recordings, as well as speakers and a lot of other things. So for me, that's what 9/11 means to me every year. When 9/11 comes, my thoughts turn to Mumia. Unfortunately, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. Our brother is still in grave danger. I'm really glad to be able to play any role and be among Mumia supporters on 9/11. This is where I need to be. Thank you all for being here tonight. Welcome to All Souls.
So thank you so much, Mario, and please extend our thanks to All Souls, staff, whoever, ministerial people, and so on. I also want to thank everyone for coming, everyone who's here, and I want to also thank all the people who've been doing the calling. Every time we send out a message asking, please call right away, we get enough feedback saying they said such and such, they're saying this, they're not picking up, so we know people call. And when we've been at the Department of Corrections and have heard indirectly that the governor, that they definitely know when we're there, and they hate it. They hate when we come to the prison in large numbers. They hate when we come to the Department of Corrections and do our little sit-ins. And they hate when we come to the Capitol building in Harrisburg. And guess what? We need to do more of that. We need to get them to hate it even more, to hate it enough so that they release Mumia. That's what we need to do. And we need to go back into the streets again and again and again till he's out. And in fact, till all our political prisoners are out. And in fact, till they start giving decent medical care. And in fact, till they start abolishing these rotten prisons. So obviously you all know that once again, Mumia's life is in danger and has been in serious danger. And that he almost died. And that's not rhetorical, that's not an exaggeration. As you know, on March 30th, when he was rushed to Schuylkill Hospital, he was in diabetic shock, just points short of diabetic coma, which is essentially brings you in a tantamount. We have some doctors and nurses here who could probably say more about it, but he was that close to death. And when his family went in to see him, they wouldn't let anybody else in. They let his brother and his wife in for a half hour at that hospital. I remember when they came out, how they looked, how they spoke, how shaken they were, because Mumia did not look like he was going to make it. And we celebrate tonight that with all the intervention from around the world and the insistence that they cannot let Mumia die, that he's with us, not in body in this room, but he's alive today and fighting like crazy to keep living. So that's the situation we're in. But that brings us, as you know, this isn't the first time Mumia's life was in danger. So back in 1990, but perhaps this was the most dangerous. Even though a death warrant was signed in 1995 and in 1999, and they were planning and intent on killing him, they didn't actually kill him, and they didn't come as close as they did this time. So that reminds us about how much they never stopped in their struggle to kill him. And when he got off, we always say this, that when he got out of death row, they were devastated. And by they, I mean all the forces that want Mumia dead and want him silenced, not just dead, but silenced. The cop's wife, the so-called widow, I mean, she is a widow, but she plays that role in such a destructive, vicious way. It's obvious that she cares a lot more about killing Mumia than about her former husband. As far as I can tell, she rarely conveys anything, any real love for him, but she sure conveys a lot of hatred. And she's in cahoots with the DA, with the Fraternal Order of Police, first and foremost, and so on and so on. And some of you may remember that when Mumia got out of death row, she said something to the effect, he's now going to be with who he deserves to be with, and hopefully they'll take care of him. And no one stopped her. No official said that's a death threat. No official, and given the role she plays on this team of death seekers, someone could have said that's not our position. But she obviously was speaking for all of them. So this was their most recent attempt to kill Mumia, where they did not succeed back in 95, 99, and this time the brothers in prison are not the ones who are out to kill him. He is loved. Mumia is loved in prison. We've run into so many people who've talked about the role he plays in trying to help people legally, trying to help them with their problems. He ran a fathers group in prison, which they closed down when 50 people showed up in the yard for one meeting. So Mumia is very much loved in prison, and in fact, he's alive with us today because a prisoner demanded that he get treatment. With all that love, they had to come up with something else. So I want to say, though, I am very impressed, extremely impressed by the work of Dr. Joseph Harris, who ends up being the leading medical person providing a testimony for wrote an affidavit for the legal suit that was filed. He did some fantastic work. The prison authorities have not allowed any of our doctors to see Mumia in a professional way, in other words, in a private room, the way they're supposed to be able to examine him. They wouldn't allow that, even though that's been demanded from the beginning. And so the movement finally said, okay, they're not going to let him do it, please. We asked the doctor to go in. It was at our movement's request that Dr. Joe Harris went in to visit him in the visiting room, like all of us here visit Mumia. All of us at the table, I think everybody here visits Mumia. And he agreed to do that. And based on his interview and of the history he took and so on, and Bob's going to talk more about that, he came up with a tentative diagnosis. To this date, the Department of Corrections has not come up with a diagnosis. Our next speaker is Bob Boyle, who many of you know over the history of many political prisoner cases, and in particular, quite known in a very famous case that was a victory for the people, the case of Dhoruba bin Wahad. We're very happy that he joined the team. His experience in working with the movement is a tremendous asset. He also played a role in helping Lynn Stewart get out of prison.
Maybe next year if I'm so honored to speak at some kind of gathering, Suzanne would be able to add to the list of names of people who I worked with other people to assist getting out, freeing Mumia or Abu-Jamal. Because that's the real goal, right? We need to save his life in terms of his medical situation, but we need freedom for him and all the political prisoners, and many others as well. This evening, because there's a lot to talk about in terms of his medical and in terms of some of the legal efforts that are going on, I'm going to be really just giving you some information. So it might come across as dry, not as analytical as the people who have been speaking before me and will speak after me, but I feel it's important, and one of the roles of a lawyer in the movement, a lawyer who is part of the movement, is to do his and her job in terms of giving you all the information so you all can take it and use it in the political struggle, which hopefully the legal and the political struggle are complementing each other. Mumia's current situation with his health began to manifest itself in around August of 2014, when he began to have episodes of this skin rash. And most of what I'm saying here tonight is public information. I don't want people to think we're talking about some private, confidential, as many of it should be, medical information. This is stuff that has been filed in court. So he started to get this rash over certain parts of his body, and it was itchy. And it came and went. Initially, it was able to be treated with, some of that even over-the-counter cortisone cream, and it would go away, but it would come back over the next few months. Nothing was done in terms of follow-up to determine what could be the cause of the rash, the underlying cause of the rash, but he would just go to the sick call whenever it came up. They gave him this, and he would use it, and it would come and go. But then it started coming back more and more. It started appearing on other parts of his body, not just behind his knees or in the joints, but his chest, his back, his face. And this was around the end of August of 2014. Once again, with a little bit of treatment, it would get kind of better, but not really, not even going back to the way it was before. It kind of stayed consistent. And to say it was an itchy rash is really to not do it justice, because if all of us have had constant itches, be it from bites or from something else, and that's pain. When you live with that, that's pain. It's not just an itch. Because the Department of Corrections likes to call it, well, all he's complaining about is an itch. But that's pain when that's happening 24/7. Then in around January of 2015, and I'm leaving some stuff out and may get my dates a little messed up here, as a result of some blood work and some regular checks, his glucose level started to rise, occasionally into the abnormal range, but no one ever told him that it was in the abnormal range. And so throughout January and into February and into March, it's now upwards of around 400. And those of you who either have diabetes or know people who do, you're getting, that's astronomical. And no one ever told him that he was, in this diabetic stage. And before this, he, had no history of diabetes. So this is the adult onset diabetes. And they did, and the cause of this is up for debate. It could be the hepatitis C, the diabetes. It could be the fact that they did give him some steroids at the time, and sometimes steroids, a side effect could be a raise in your glucose level. But the fact remains, whatever the cause was, they didn't tell him. They didn't tell him that his glucose level was now in a dangerous point. And so at the end of March of this year, 2015, March 30th, as Suzanne described earlier, he fell into diabetic shock. He lost consciousness. And were it not for some of the prisoners who knew and loved him, Suzanne did not exaggerate, he very easily could have died during that episode. And he was finally rushed to the hospital, where I think his glucose was now over 500 at this time. And, which is, once again, astronomical and can cause, you're in danger of death just on the basis of that. It was only about a 2-day stay at the prison at Schuylkill, which is not far from SCI Mahanoy, where he was and is currently incarcerated. Blood work was done at this hospital, and it revealed not only the abnormal glucose level, which they were able to bring down with some emergency treatment to ultimately within kind of a normal range, but he also had anemia. His hemoglobin level had dropped precipitously, and there were other abnormalities in his blood work at this time. Now, the prison system, had known since about 2012 that Mumia had the hepatitis C antibody, which is just the basic first-level test. Doesn't mean you have hepatitis C. And what needs to happen after you learn that you have the antibody is follow-up testing needs to be done to see if you have a viral load, which means that it's active, and to see what genotype you have. Neither of those tests were done. So all that was known was that he had the antibody for hepatitis C and not an active case. So, the blood work that was, if not before, that was done when he was at Schuylkill certainly placed the Department of Corrections on notice that in addition to the diabetes, there were serious issues going on. And in addition, he had this diabetic shock, and this rash and skin condition is not going away. And it's getting worse. When he comes back to Mahanoy, the rash is now covering 70% of his body. His skin is flaking. Those who'll speak after me, who were visiting him during that time and visiting him now, they'll describe the way his skin looked. But, the closest thing I can describe it when I finally met him and saw it was, I'm very fair-skinned, and if I stay out in the sun, for more than 20 minutes, I get that burn, and then it all peels off, and it's itchy, and it all peels off. That's the way his face looked, his arms looked, the other parts of his body looked. That was the nature of the rash, and it had discoloration, which other people will describe as well. And this was going on all through April of 2015. And in the meantime, he is moved to the infirmary at SCI Mahanoy, where he's getting more regular blood work, and the hemoglobin's going down. The other aspects of his blood work are a whole list, if you ever seen these medical records where it's abnormal in one column and normal in the other, there's a lot in the abnormal column. And I'm not the doctor, so I can't explain everything, but clearly the anemia and other issues were going on with him. And in the early June of 2015, he was taking a shower one day, and it was almost like, the way he described it, fire over his skin. And he was again taken to the hospital, and this was a place called Geisinger Medical Center in Pennsylvania, which is known to be a good hospital for the middle of Pennsylvania. And he ended up being there for 8 days. Of course, during those 8 days, he was denied visits with his family, with his supporters, and even his lawyers. And he was essentially held incommunicado. But during that time, they did a whole host of tests on Mumia and ruled out a lot of things as the cause of the anemia. He didn't have blood loss. They ruled out many different kind of cancers. He said that they were taking so much blood, every day he felt like a vampire. I mean, they were testing him, and sonograms and CT scans and colonoscopies and endoscopies. And, they could bill all of this, you understand, to the, so they're earning a lot of money while they're doing these tests. In addition to, they should probably be doing the test as well, but, hospitals and doctors love to order tests because they cost a fortune, and the taxpayers have to pay for it, ultimately. On the 19th, he's returned to Mahanoy, and what's interesting is in the discharge papers, when Suzanne told about, there was really no diagnosis for his skin condition other than eczema, which can be caused by 1,000,001 things. They ruled out a lot of different kinds of cancers, other causes for his anemia. But Geisinger did state in their discharge report, this man has tested positive for the hepatitis C antibody. You, prison system, should follow it up, conduct the necessary follow-up tests, and treat him if that's appropriate. And this is right in the discharge report that he got from Geisinger. Now, also at Geisinger, they did treat the skin condition with really palliative means, not the underlying cause, and it did get better for a while. They had him on these steroid creams and wraps and every day, 4 times a day. And it did get better. By the time he got out of the hospital, it got significantly better. But once he got back to the prison and was not giving the treatment, and you're not treating the underlying cause of the skin condition, and you're not even trying to find out really what it is, it went back to the way it was. And it was around this time, as Suzanne was speaking about, that that movement folks arranged for Joe Harris to go in, and who examined him in the visiting room, and he practices in the Bronx and serves the community, sees a lot of hepatitis C, sees a lot of these diseases, and knew from his experience that this skin condition is likely a manifestation of the hepatitis C, as is anemia, as can be adult onset diabetes. All of these things can be a manifestation of hepatitis C. And so it all cried out, since he doesn't have all of these horrible cancers, which thank goodness he doesn't, as a result of the Geisinger test, if you believe those results. But everything points to the fact that it's probably the hepatitis C that is causing all of these issues. He had an abnormal sonogram of his liver. The CT scan showed abnormalities. The doctors can describe these, equations they use on different blood levels, and they came up with our consultant doctors, and I have to mention Barbara Zeller as well, working with Joe Harris, looking at the blood figures, saying, there's damage to his liver. And so this is an active case of hepatitis C.